I can honestly say that this work-life balance thing is messed up right now. People would imagine how complex these video games are.
I think this project is important on many levels, and it's also a game that I just want to play.
This game is one of the most anticipated FPS experiences. He's going to absolutely kill it when it launches on Steam.
So you will release the early access. We're going to get our hands on it, play it. Talk about the development that goes after the launch.
First thing that happens after the launch is that I'm taking a break. A pretty major one.
Let's talk a little bit about the features then, right? Just to reiterate exactly what we can expect.
The obvious ones are first that the maps are quite big. The distance is pretty huge. I'm actually worried that it might be too huge, having this narrative experience of traveling multiple maps. Now there's these dynamic events occurring, which basically means randomized game events, and you don't know what happens and when. One of the big one is the multi-shelter support.
If you do find a shelter, what's the exact process that you have thought of to unlock the shelter?
You find out that there's locked doors. I would assume most players stumble into those accidentally and they notice that there's a UI pop-up meaning that you need an attic key to open this door. Different traders provide different keys.
If you could just describe what a day in the life looks like for you in terms of development, but also the back end, the financing, taxes.
Oh man, I don't know where even to begin. There was one mistake that I did, and if there's some other developers who listen to this, maybe I should highlight this, that other people don't make this, which is
Antti, it's such a pleasure to have you back on the show for the third time for round 3. Yet another year in review, let's say, but now it's a bit more interesting, I would say, because we're getting closer and closer to the release of the early access, which is a huge deal for you, obviously, and for everybody who's waiting to play the game. So first of all, a huge congratulations to all the milestones that you've achieved. And, I just really can't wait for the next steps. But, the first order of business, I think, if I'm correct, you have around 500,000 wish lists. And if that is true, that is absolutely amazing. And let me just say congratulations. And how do you feel about that?
First of all, thanks for having me for this round 3 interview. Times are definitely getting interesting every day from this point forward. And yeah, I think the current wishlist number is actually, I checked those a few days ago, it's around 600,000 now. And
wow.
Actually yesterday, the demo reached 1 million. Steam kind of handles these downloads a bit weirdly. They are not called downloads, they are called lifetime licenses granted. Or anyways, It means that 1 million people have put the Road to Vostok demo to the library of their Steam account, and that's a number that I would have never imagined when I started this journey. And when it comes to those wish lists, those are definitely really important. Those have helped me a lot during this development journey because they are like verification that you are doing a good job in some sense, but you cannot kind of like surround yourself with the comfort and feeling that now you're secured for the launch. You still have to kind of like behave like nobody has known this project yet and don't settle down even though you have those wish lists. But I'm definitely highly grateful that many people have wishlisted the game, and I still suggest that you do that because it's really important thing for the launch that those wishlists exist.
Definitely. No, for sure. First of all, 600,000. My goodness, that's like absolutely crazy. The only other game I know that had indie game, that had that much was Unrecord, I think. That's the game where you play from like the camera perspective of a SWAT team member or something like that. I forgot the official term, but they got 600,000 wish lists. And now you are here with 600,000 wish lists. That's absolutely amazing. Again, congratulations, and completely well deserved. And I'm sure everybody's super excited for what's to come with Road to Vostok. So, all right, let's talk about the final demo that was released by you. I've played that demo. as much as I can, of course, considering that I got a kid and everything like that and work. But as much as I could, I played it and I truly, truly enjoyed it. And it's one of those games, even though it's a demo, that really put me into this mood of like, oh my God, I'm actually playing like a game, where I could experiment a little bit with how my shelter looks like, right? I could kind of go on this adventure without knowing what's going to happen. And those little details were, very, very, at least for me, very appealing. And so all in all, could you talk about the general reception of, the final demo, and what are some of the thoughts from the gamers that you have, that you have witnessed, you've perhaps talked to or read about online?
Sure. When it comes to the final demo, I think that was a point where I kind of, at least in some sense, redeemed some of the trust that I lost during the engine switch thing, because that was
right.
I don't know if you watched, but I actually had this kind of like developer plays old builds stream, and I played some of those old builds that were the first ones that appeared after the engine switch, and those were so bad. I don't know how I managed to put those out, since I felt so ashamed even showing those. So I totally understand that during that engine switch topic, things were really, really rough, really empty, abandoned. There was so little content to the game, and this final demo, like mentioned, kind of redeemed hopefully some of that trust that was lost, because now there were multiple improvements. It definitely felt more like a game. It's kind of repetitive theme with our interviews, that I'm never proud of any of my work yet. And I am not that proud even with the final demo, but I'm at least satisfied that it provided enough content that people could enjoy the demo many hours, and it wasn't if the final demo would have been total disaster, that would have been really bad for the early access, because then I am not regained that trust back. So I'm at least grateful that I didn't mess that up. And when it comes to, it was part of the Steam Next Fest, that went really well. I don't remember the exact numbers, but in terms of how many players played during the Next Fest and how many wishlists it gathered, it performed really well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm first of all very happy that it performed to your liking, and I've looked at many other videos of people playing the demo, and everybody seems to truly enjoy it. And again, there's this sense of adventure in the game, and knowing that it's coming from a solo developer, people understand how difficult it is to create something like that, and it's so vast, it's so replayable, and it feels very pleasant to play. And it just doesn't get boring. And yet again, I mentioned this before in our interviews, and I'm going to mention it now. Like, I get quite scared when the enemies spot you, because again, they're lurking somewhere there in the world. You don't really see them, and then when they spot you, it's like this scary moment. Now the AI has been updated just a little bit, because you added a few more behaviors to them, and that adds a whole other dynamic to the game. Like, they actually hide, and they play like sneaky games. At least with me, they did. I was trying, to shoot one of them, and then he ran into the house. He was hiding. And it felt really very refreshing and really, really cool. So I'm not surprised that Steam Next Fest went really good for you. Now, again, for those perhaps who might not know, what exactly is Steam Fest, and how does Steam Fest help indie developers and indie games get new audiences?
First I want to few points that I want to kind of highlight that you mentioned. I think the game currently definitely can get boring because there's few weak points in my mind, and I would say the community agrees. Even though the AI has improved, it's not at the level that it should be, and that is one of the main goals. I have actually laid out these upcoming builds in this roadmap. You can see these builds when you play the demo. There's a roadmap button on the main menu. One of the first, or actually the first build that comes after the early access is a build called Nomads, which brings the friendly faction called Nomads in the game. It introduces AI versus AI combat and basically overhauls the entire AI system because there's so many shortcuts that I had to take with the current AI, so it's not the level where I can develop it. So it's one weak point currently for sure. And another one is in the final demo, the distance to this border zone and having this dangerous journey is basically non-existent because from the first map you spawn right away to the border zone, and that was done on purpose because I had to create the separation between the final demo and the early access in terms of what content is delivered, because if I release all those maps with the final demo, the early access would feel a bit lackluster if all the content was already existent. So now this early access, at least, that weak point is addressed definitely because the distances are much further, and it actually feels like this dangerous journey, which is the main ideology or idea, vision for how the game should feel from players' perspective. But the Steam Next Fest, when you asked about that, Steam basically allows for every developer one opportunity to participate before your title releases, so you only have one shot to utilize that free exposure. And it was I think there's 2 or 3, I don't remember, but at least 2 every year. There's the October Next Fest, there's the March Next Fest, maybe there's some Spring Next Fest, but at least there's 2, maybe 3 or 4 every year, and you can kind of choose where do you want to participate with your demo. And I choose the October one because it fit the most. It was the most logical choice related to the early access release timeline.
Got it, for sure. That's definitely a good thing that Steam is doing to help gain more exposure for sure. For all sorts of indie games and developers. All right, that's very interesting, and again, very excited for what's to come with the AI. I mean, if I'm already having trouble with it, so if it's gonna get even more, even better, it's gonna be a crazy experience, at least for me, for sure.
Actually, one point that I would like to add to that next test topic, there was kind of one mistake that I did, and if there's some other developers who listen to this, maybe I should highlight this, that other people don't make this if they are similar position like I was. When you have a semi-big audience that would potentially would like to try that demo, I knew that, and I was at least hoping that many people would play that final demo, and they did, but I choose to opt in to this optional so-called press preview build. That press preview build, it's optional, like mentioned, and you can upload it before the actual Next Fest. And obviously, when you give the demo before the Next Fest, the most amount of traffic is generated before the Next Fest happens. Even though it was meant just for the so-called press, but actually everybody was press with this mindset. And this basically means that when Steam puts these demos, Next Fest demos, kind of like which should get more exposure and so on, all my main traffic and exposure that would have probably helped with those Steam algorithms was generated before the actual Next Fest. So I kind of shot myself in the foot by opting into that press preview, because all that traffic was not calculated to the actual Next Fest numbers.
Oh my. So you potentially could have gotten more exposure had you not gone with the press preview, but waited a little bit and did it after, right?
I think that would have been the the best choice for me, because when you have this somewhat already an audience that is ready to play the game, of course they are trying to play the game whenever it's available and not release a certain Next Fest window. So I was maybe doing a bit wrong by choosing to opt in, but nevertheless, the end result, I'm still very, very happy with it, but it's just something to keep in mind if you have similar position like I was when you are trying to maximize the exposure with the Steam Next Fest.
Got it. Okay, well, that's definitely great advice for anyone who's willing to participate, for sure. But talking about, your transition to the early access, right? At a certain point, you said, guys, okay, now I'm completely transitioning to like a different branch of development, focusing completely on, the early access. And there definitely has to be a change in, your work ethic and in what you're doing. So my question would be about the development process of the early access. What has changed and how has it changed? And has it become a bit easier perhaps for you to work because you feel a sense of relief knowing that people are eager to play the early access? Or do you have more pressure on yourself because of that?
What has changed? It has been so long ago when I used to, or I renamed these so-called different branches. There was the demo branch, which is now available on Steam. It got few parts of the other branch, which is called commercial branch. Yeah. And that holds all the early access content and features and assets and so on. Of course, there's some overlap between these two with the Next Fest demo, for example. But the commercial branch, in many ways, it feels quite different to develop with that because there's different kinds of tools present there which need to be in place in order to achieve certain early access features. For example, these expanded map sizes and few things that are totally switched tech-wise to support certain features. It has to be, it's more secretive, if I would say, because there's so many lore things present and things that I want to keep as a secret. So I'm really skeptical who I share with any of those files that exist in the commercial branch, because
for sure.
I have been really open about this, that I have never encrypted the demo branch, meaning there have been modders and people who have kind of like explored the project files, and that's have been totally a choice that I have wanted to make. But that's a no-go for this commercial branch until the early access releases. So I have to keep really secret of what I share and so on. But it definitely feels different to develop that. I'm not sure if there's more pressure, but I can at least say that in terms of content, when there's so many maps now, so much assets for solo developer, one of the biggest hurdles is actually the playtesting. Even though you have all these development tools that you can fly really quickly to another spot and spawn different things, there's just so many, for example, surfaces and colliders that you have to test that player doesn't fall into the map or everything. So there's so much more testing that is related to the commercial branch compared to the demo branch.
And this testing, just to concentrate on that for a second, because it's really, as you mentioned, quite an important part. Is that something that you organize locally, meaning with the people that you know, or do you utilize, how would you call it, agencies or like playtest groups, let's say, who do that for you?
Currently, I'm doing it all by myself. I do have plans.
Oh, wow.
I'm planning to host few so-called playtest groups. One will be locally here in Finland, and one would be an international effort. But once again, those are kind of like double-edged swords, because you have to really trust that, for example, if you're sharing builds project file from the early access, you have to trust, even though you would sign NDAs. But if you do that, this close to launch and somebody leaks the entire build, which is, even though I would encrypt it, it can be still decompiled, and I would potentially, there's always a risk with those playtests this close to the launch.
Oh gosh.
And I still have those plans to do those playtests, but for now it's all up to me to handle that.
Right.
Of course, I have few friends that I really trust. I don't have to worry about those things.
Of course.
But it's definitely a hurdle, that testing thing.
For sure, definitely. And just out of curiosity, so whenever a game or a company is trying to conduct a playtest, you're saying that there's always a chance to be hacked, let's say, and for the playtesters to be able to visualize the internals of the game. Is it because you're sending the whole? I mean, what is it? Like a .exe file to them? Is it because of that? Like they're able to just access that whenever they want, or?
Yeah. Maybe I should clarify a bit. When it comes to like actual companies and how this playtesting is done, usually there's so-called QA people, meaning quality assurance, who are dedicated in-house playtesters for the company, and that playtesting occurs from the moment the production starts all the way to the end. Of course, the priority changes, but that's the kind of like in-house playtesting. Then there's the external playtesting, which back in the day was more of like some company people went to the streets and offered pizza to young people, and young people came in to play. That's long gone. No more pizza playtesting days, I would assume. So there's kind of like studios and partners and companies that fully focus on playtesting, bug reporting, and so on. So you can outsource that playtesting to another party. That's one way to do it. Or you can just host sending beta keys, doing these online playtesting events. My approach that I had in mind would have been that I would have, or I will, handpicked few people, first locally and then internationally, because one important topic is that you have to be really specific if you want a solid data from that playtest that right kind of people are playtesting the game. For example, you don't want that your most enthusiast, I hate the word fan, but fans are playing and playtesting because they usually sugarcoat and don't feel that comfortable of being harsh and providing the real critic. So you want your target audience to be the players who would potentially play your game, but they don't know you maybe yet, and they don't know the game idea. So you get this new player perspective that don't sugarcoat things.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay, now I understand, because so you're going to host it by yourself online, and there's a risk. There you run a risk with somebody trying to steal the files. Okay, got it, for sure. Well, obviously, best of luck with that, definitely. But since we're on a topic of, let's say the software of video games, I also know that you plan eventually, when the early access gets released, to release software development tools to the players. Is that correct? Is that still something that you would like to do?
Sure. I think the first initiative that I want to take is provide a really solid modding tools, meaning making the modding pipeline as effortless as possible, because even though there are now, I would say, over 50 mods and quite active modding community in Project Discord and so on, it's still in some level really painful because you have to make these tweaks and hacks to get some things work. So it's not designed to be modding friendly, and I want to make it modding friendly. It's definitely a big help that the engine that I'm using, the Godot, is open source. It opens a lot of modding possibilities right out the gate, but there's so many things that I could improve still, so I want to focus on that first. Once the modding pipeline is fully figured out, I would want to focus on sharing the actual development tools and some things that are a part of that commercial branch that I have used to extend some of the features that the Godot is maybe lacking, or some that I just feel would be helpful to many other developers, because I have there's no need for me to hoard these features and keep everything secret by myself. So I'm definitely also interested in that. But that comes only after the modding pipeline is figured out.
For sure. Yeah. I just wanted to, get a decisive, let's say, opinion on your end, because I think that's really cool to be able to provide the modding tools to the players so they can kind of do whatever they want and create, their own creative, assets or missions or whatever they want for the game. I think that's always really, really cool. And the fact that you are going to give it and provide it to the players just adds another layer of authenticity and trust from the player to yourself, which is, absolutely amazing. But that's great. Although I'm not a modder, I'll be very happy to see all the cool mods that will come in the future for sure. But then let's talk a little bit about the features then, right? Just to reiterate exactly what we can expect from the early access. I know that, the game's going to be bigger. There's going to be more maps, more areas to explore, but perhaps you want to dive a little deeper as to what we can expect. And then we can, go into a few tangents from there.
Yeah, there's still some things that are not fully yet decided, meaning there's still development time left, and meaning if I have enough time to implement those. But if I would also include some of these things that are present in the final demo and explain this whole feature set that will be present in the early access, I think the obvious ones are first that there's how many maps there actually is. There's a lot of maps compared to the demo. The maps are quite big. They have slightly increased even from the final demo. They are a bit more polished. There's few pretty interesting point of interest in those maps. There's definitely, I would like to have more of those, but I'm working on the time and resources that were given to me. So they are pretty good state, not the full final form, but nevertheless, there's many maps. Most importantly, the distance and the idea behind this dangerous journey to East, having this narrative experience of traveling multiple maps before reaching the border zone and crossing the border, that's definitely in there. The distance is pretty huge. I'm actually worried that it might be too huge in some sense, but I'm not worried about that. Then one key piece that adds to this dangerous journey idea is that random stuff should happen during this trip. And that was totally missing from the demo. But now there's these dynamic events occurring, which basically means randomized game events that are specified in different scenarios. For example, in different maps, there might be different events and you don't know what happens and when, and you just kind of like become notified maybe that some sound activated somewhere and now some event starts to roll out, and those create really nice small. It's kind of similar like you play these big open world games like Skyrim. You have this one main goal that you want to reach to some quest, but you kind of deviate to these small side quests along the road. So these dynamic events are a bit in the same mindset that you have these. For example, if you are now traveling to the east, you might head to the next map. Maybe nothing happens. You visit the trader in that map because now there's 4 traders with all the task custom loot pools and so on. Maybe that small side quest was the trader thing. In the next map, maybe you hear that airdrop plane is actually coming and there's this airdrop event happening somewhere in the map. You kind of deviate to that and try to get good loot there, but AI is also attracted to the airdrop thing. Maybe in the next map you hear some kind of faction-based dynamic event. For example, the bandit van is... That's one of the coolest things in the trailer, I would say. It's totally secret yet what the bandit van actually is, but it's really good way. And that might spawn the bandit boss, which is now those faction bosses are in the game. So that creates a whole another danger level because those bosses are quite deadly. And now you maybe reach the border zone now the helicopter can actually, it's not always there, but if that dynamic event occurs, the helicopter can actually fire at you. That's a risk.
My God.
The mines are randomized. Then when you go across the border, maybe another dynamic event occurs and the military armored PTR might occur. You must avoid that. And there's still more maps along this road. So there's so many small deviations that I really like. And that's one of the key improvements to the final demo. Then when it comes to other features, one of the big one is the multi-shelter support, which also fits to this narrative of this dangerous journey, because when you're traveling these long distances, you want to take these breaks, store your loot, and that's not possible if you only have one shelter in your main starting map. So now you can unlock new shelters with different sizes, different styles, decorate those however you want. There's so many new furniture-related props also, so there's so much more possibilities with the decoration. So you may start with the small cabin, which is quite small on purpose, and you notify or you notice quite soon that there's actually multiple shelters along the way, and you want to start doing tasks and hopefully also quest, if I manage to get that quest system in place, to achieve keys, and then you unlock those shelters which help you with this dangerous journey idea. So the multi-shelter support is definitely a big one. Then I would say there's new weapons, new items, the loot pools is so much more expanded. There's audio improvements. There's so many small topics. I have the changelog somewhere. I think the changelog, meaning which things have been added, which have been changed, that's well over 200 points already. Many people like weapon stuff, for example, the PIP scopes, meaning dual render scopes, where the actual scope, your screen doesn't zoom in, the actual scope provides the zoom, meaning like the realistic way how scopes works. Yeah. That's in the early access. Then there's different game modes. When you start a new game, you can opt into these, the standard mode, meaning you start from the shelter or your vitals are 100, you get a starting kit, but then you can opt into those more difficult game options, for example, the darkness mode. You start with no gear, random vitals, you don't spawn to the shelter, you spawn to the random map, and I would assume that many people who have not played early access, they might be quite confused, because if you spawn one of those new maps, you have no idea where you are, where the transition points are, because they have never played those. And I really like that that people really get to experience at least some moments that they don't know where they are. And then there's the Iron Man kind of like challenge mode, meaning the permadeath is everywhere. That's not recommended for a new player, but that's quite fun challenge to have. But yeah, there's so many small things, but I would say the biggest definitely improvement to demo is the dangerous journey multi-shelter dynamic event combo thing.
Right. Well, basically one of the main gameplay loops and gameplay elements that you were trying to create from the beginning. So just to talk about them for the moment, about the shelter system, right? So you said that you'll be able to discover these new shelters along the way. Are you talking about you will just accidentally discover them, or will you have like an NPC tell you, oh, well, if you go to that map, you might find a shelter there, and then if you do find a shelter, what's the exact process that you have thought of to unlock the shelter? Just to get a picture of what we can expect for the shelter system.
Great question. That you start from, if you choose the standard difficulty mode, you start from the base shelter, which is called cabin, and that is kind of like your introduction shelter. In the same map, meaning the starting map, the village, you find out that there's locked doors. I would assume most players would stumble into those accidentally, and they notice that there's a UI pop-up, meaning that you need an attic key to open this door or something like that. And that's maybe a small hint that something is behind this door. And then when you interact with the traders, you notify that one of the task elements is looking a bit different than others. It has this kind of like a cool looking background of the shelter. So you see that, okay, this task is somewhat special compared to the others, and you notice that you receive a key when you complete the task, and that task is most obviously the most difficult one of those. And when you achieve that key, then you can unlock the shelter, and now it's unlocked during the entire gameplay of your save file. And different traders provide different keys, but there's also a few shelters, or at least in the early access, there's one shelter that is unlocked by default. For example, there's this small tent that is located at it's basically a Finnish military tent, which obviously don't have doors and locks because it's a tent. So it's unlocked by default, and you might find that in one of the wood forest areas in the new maps. So that's more like you have to just find that. But it's a combination of finding and achieving those keys that will unlock the shelters.
Wow, that's really cool. And what about the loot? Does the loot transfer in between the shelters?
There's even the current demo has a feature called Furniture Catalog, which is basically a large Tetris inventory that follows your character and is separated from your main play inventory. So I think, I'm not sure if other people might agree with this, but I actually really like this concept, which in some ways was developed by accident because I didn't plan this. But when you're using this furniture catalog, meaning you can, for example, take all the furniture to your catalog from your starting shelter, but if you die with all that furniture filled in your catalog, you lose all that furniture. And this means that when you are opening up these new shelters, you have to make this risky travel. I call these moving days. You hoard all the furniture with your furniture catalog, and now you have to transition these far distances to your new, big, cool, unlocked shelter. But you have so much value with you when you're traveling with that character, because if you die, you lose all that furniture, and that hurts because you have acquiring some of those furnitures is quite time consuming, so you don't want to lose those. So I think the risky moving day concept is quite cool, because many players will have to deal with those if they want to utilize the old furniture to the new one and so on.
Oh my God, that's crazy. Moving days. Oh my God, that's okay. Yeah, that's a whole other gameplay element in the game, right? Transferring all your sacred loot to your new to your new shelter. Wow, that's cool. And great. It's also great because it adds a sense of discovery within the maps, where you can accidentally stumble upon something and be like, oh, cool. So this could be a new cabin, and I need to figure out how to potentially open it. That's really cool, and that's amazing, and all understood. And I want to ask you another question about the random events. And when you were talking about the random events, I just quickly remembered when I was playing Fallout 4 for the first time when it just came out. One of the first missions is like you have to go to Diamond City. And I think I spent maybe close to 5 or 6 hours before going to Diamond City just by accident doing all these random events. And they're extremely interesting, and they make the game very interesting. Also, Red Dead Redemption does that extremely well. I want to ask you, how do you tackle something like that? Because if we're talking about an open world game like Red Dead Redemption, for them, from what I understood, it's a diameter of like 40 seconds, I believe. So if you travel one direction for 40 seconds, you're guaranteed that something will happen. And obviously your game is not as big as Red Dead Redemption 2. So how exactly do you tackle, random events? What's the way to do it for you?
I could actually go a bit deep with this topic, because there's multiple things that I haven't mentioned yet, how this dynamic event things work. First, I have to explain this so-called event calendar thing, which is, I don't think many people will believe this, but I have actually written really cool lore for the game in 2012, which is so long ago. Of course, some part of that is refined during the years, but the entire game idea, which have never yet been revealed what the game is actually about, even though I have made some pretty, if I would say, bad lore videos on YouTube, but at least the
they're
main
cool.
concept that I have for the game is really cool, or at least I think so. And one of the key topics for that is that the game world progresses related to this lore, and it is highlighted to the player through this event calendar, which is basically an UI list showing that when you start from the day one, it might say that there's a list of days. For example, day 10, airdrop starts arriving to Area 05, which means that now this set of dynamic events is added to the dynamic event pool that might occur, but that those doesn't appear until the day 10. Okay, the next day might be day 23. Certain map get compromised and certain faction might infiltrate across the border zone to this map on a random time or something like that. Maybe the next event, the bandit boss arrives to the Area 5 on day 53 or something, and now the boss spawn event is added to the event pool list, and the event pool list gets more and more kind of like aggressive, if I would say. So if you start with really mild events, for example, just an airplay flyby event might occur on day 1, but maybe on day 100 there's so much more complexity and possibilities of getting so-called nasty events, because there's good events. For example, the airdrop is a good event, but then the military PTR is a bad event. So the event calendar gives a player, when you start a new game, this feeling like I'm getting more and more content when the days go by, and I have so many cool plans what kind of events will be added to that list. I think the early access will have around 8 different events, and those will be added along the development. But the event calendar is linked to how the event get added to the event pool, and when the actual event activates, it's handled through this. It's basically just a randomizer, map-based randomizer, that this map can use these kinds of events when the day is X and U, for example, and there's a certain possibility that these events can occur. But yeah, that's basically how the dynamic events work, and the event calendar is, I think it's really cool because it gives you some sense of like there's more to come, and this early game is quite simple, but for example, people have getting used to that these factions are only holding their specific maps that they should belong to. But for example, these events will break that illusion that, for example, the military can now infiltrate when the certain day goes by, when the lore is kind of like explaining that these and these things happen. And now the military is no longer just in the Vostok. Now it can be in Area 5. And there's really cool events, I think, already in the early access. And I can't wait that hopefully I have time to put some kind of intro about the actual lore without revealing everything, but giving sense what I wrote to the game 2012, because it really is designed around these events and how everything links together and so on. But yeah.
Right. That's really cool. That's really awesome. And again, super intriguing. It would be definitely nice if you could somehow integrate a little bit of the lore into the early access, just to tease us at least a little bit for what's to come. But to talk about the lore then, so far at least in the early access, there won't be any, let's say major lore moments that would open up the story for the players, right?
Yeah, not probably, because...
Got it.
There's a thing, I have already prototypes for something called quest system. And it's a possibility that I could add it to the early access, which means that traders will have now both the basic tasks and also the lore-based quests. But the issue that I have with those is, for example, the grandma trader is the most important character of the game, and there's really specific lore moments that are linked to that. But I'm still working on so limited resources and development budget. So do I want to so-called half-ass the questing with my limited resources, or do I wait maybe few months until the releases happened, and now I have hopefully so much more development resources that I could really make those things as I planned. So I'm a bit against of half-assing those quests just to get them somewhat implemented to early access. So I don't like that idea. So it probably will be that none of the major lore elements are not part into early access
Got it.
yet.
Got it. Well, I mean, it makes sense. I think it's always better, like you said, to not half-ass it. Let us wait a little bit longer, but then finally release what you intended to release. I'm just asking to make sure, what to expect from the early access. And so in the early access, they're just the main gameplay loop would be expanded, basically, right? The player will be able to concentrate on the full journey, concentrate on getting introduced to the different traders, and kind of feel their way through the specifically major gameplay elements of the game without having the story on top of that. So with the final release, I assume it would be the whole thing all together, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm almost certain that I will add some sort of intro when you start a new game. Not any cinematic stuff, but something voice acted that tell you basically the rough idea what happened and why the world is like it is in this part of the game world. And that would kind of introduce pretty nicely why there are even people existing there, why these traders are there, why this evacuation happened, why there's no military presence, because it really doesn't make sense until you have that introduction to this game world and what happened. And I think when that introduction is given, the actual quest is not that important because you understand why the world is like it is currently, because it will change along with those days. So yeah, that's pretty much how the early access will feel. It's more expanded. It's a bit sandboxy feeling, and this dangerous journey idea is definitely present there, which is the main selling point, I would say, for the early access.
For sure. And am I right in understanding that all the traders that you have showcased to us will be present in the early access?
Yeah, there's four traders that I have made. There's the Generalist, Doctor, Gunsmith, and Grammar. The Grammar is a difficult one because I have to be really careful of, like mentioned, I don't encrypt my game files. So if I don't add the lore and quest stuff now, it means that I have to delete all that game files from the project file, because I'm pretty sure those would get explored and ruined before the actual content is in the game. So the Grammar is the most difficult one of these. But yeah, 4 traders will be present. It's also difficult where I put the actual Grammar, because the location is, I would not want to do anything placeholder with that. But yeah, let's say that 100% sure there's 3 traders, and 95% sure there's 4 traders.
Cool. Okay, and the cat, obviously.
Yeah, it's part of the Grammar, but it's not. You can have it in the early access without the Grammar, because there's some sort of rescue event where you will find the cat.
That's really cool. And the box, of course, is going to be something very special, but not for the early access. Or for the early access, you're going to have the special box that you were talking about.
Yeah, it's kind of like Finnish.
Oh, okay.
Special for Finnish people.
Finnish people, okay.
I don't know how to explain that box thing, but Finnish people will understand why the box is a special thing. And linked to those dynamic events, the cat is actually part of this event pool. So you need to have certain amount of days occur before the cat rescue event kind of occurs in the game world. So once again, those are linked to the progression of days.
That's really cool. And the cat can be kind of your companion, from what I understood. You just showed the cat kind of be present on the fishing boat, but what else could you potentially do with a cat in terms of the cat being your companion?
In the first phase, this cat is, it's basically like, you would consider it's a dynamic item or dynamic furniture because cat stays in the box. It is fully animated. You can put it in your inventory. You can take it to your shelter. When you lay down the box, if the box is aligned correctly, because I'm sure people won't be so gentle with the box, so they might drop it and it might stumble all around. But when the box is placed correctly on surfaces, the lid opens up and the cat kind of like becomes visually standing up and doing all kinds of cat things. And then you have to take care of it, meaning there's one extra vital bar that activates on your UI and you must feed the cat and so on. But you don't it's not forced to you. It's designed in a way that when the grammar is fully introduced, you have basically an option to, you can rescue the cat for yourself, or you can give the cat to grandma who lost the cat. But there will be a moment where you might meet with the cat again if something happens to grandma. But yeah, it's a you have multiple moments with the cat for sure, but it's not forced to you if you don't want to have any companions with you.
I think it's super cool, cute, and amazing. I don't want to pry too deep into anything that you can't say. Please don't say it. Don't be forced to say it. It's better for us to uncover it. The final question about the cat, just a random thought that came into my head. So since you're gonna have to feed the cat, if you choose to rescue the cat and have the cat as your pet, if you don't have food or if you forget to feed it, what happens to the cat? Or can the cat like die or something like that?
Yeah, the cat dies and there's no more cat. So it's some of the dynamic events are one-time events. So they only happen once in the playthrough. And for example, no more cat spawns if the one cat dies. So you only have one dynamic cat rescue event in one playthrough.
All right, got it. So you have to be, very prepared to be able to give the food to the cat.
And kind of like those dangerous moving days, when that rescue event happens and you put the cat box in your inventory and your shelter is nowhere near that rescue place. So if you die with the cat in your inventory, there's no more cat in that playthrough. So you have one of these really specific moments that if you want to have the cat, you must make sure that you don't die before returning to your shelter.
My God. Oh, geez. Okay, dude, that's crazy. So very interesting. Very, very interesting, honestly. To change the subject a little bit, we're going to come back to the early access in a few minutes for sure. But we've touched this topic during our second interview. And the topic is kind of the day in the life of Antti. You mentioned that it would be great to, have somebody take a look and record kind of the day in the life of not only you specifically, but of indie developers and what it's like and all the difficulties that go, with making games by yourselves, the things that are behind the scenes. So since we can't do it, since I can't fly over there right now, for example, and talk to you, if we can talk about it verbally, if you could just describe what a day in the life looks like for you in terms of development, but also the back end, the financing, the taxes and all the stuff that is not interesting.
Oh man, I don't know where even to begin. and not to sound selfish, I'm not talking about day in the life Antti in a sense that I would want to get exposure and become famous. I'm talking about in a sense that people would imagine how complex these video games are and how much small details have to be in place in order to make an early access game like this, because the game development is just a small part of the whole equation. There's so many, kind of like when I mentioned that you have this gameplay sense, this one dangerous road, and the goal is to reach the border zone. My dangerous journey is to release the game, but there's so many these side quests that need to happen along the way. And
that's really well put.
I can talk about some of these side quests in a moment, but first I have to say that day in the life of Antti changes quite radically based on what phase on the production we are. For example, 1 year ago, my day looked totally different than it's now. Many people talk about this work-life balance thing and how you should be this healthy wellness guy, but I can say that if you have put 4 years work into something that you truly are passionate about, you have sacrificed multiple characters for one specific goal, and that one goal is tied to this one release date, I can assure you that you don't worry about work-life balance at that point if the goal is to avoid crashing and burning down your entire future. So I can honestly say that this work-life balance thing is totally messed up right now, and that's a thing that I have allowed to happen because it needs to happen. Somebody has to take the responsibility to make sure that everything that could be done is done in time. And there's also so many sacrifices, not just personal time, but for example, you have to be quite honest with your relatives, family, friends that I won't be attending this thing, I won't be here for this reason, because you have to prioritize the development because you're the only guy. If you're somewhere having a holiday or a nice weekend break, that means that nobody's developing the game at that time. And so far, I have to be really careful about maximizing the work input and output, because there has to be this buffer. The downside of being a solo developer is if you, for example, get sick, that's a really big thing that you don't want to get sick, because, for example, 2 weeks of being sick means it can ruin some milestone completely. So you must avoid everything about getting sick. Same thing applies, for example, to your fingers and hands. If you messed up your index finger and you can use mouse or keyboard, that also puts your work input by a big margin down. And I have been so skeptical and careful now. So I'm basically locked in between 4 walls and not doing anything that could hurt my fingers. So it's pretty sad reality at the moment, but I cannot, I have to minimize all the risks that I don't get sick and I don't hurt my hands. Because I had actually one of these minor accident, it's multiple months ago, but I used to go, now I have dropped it completely, to the gym, local gym, and I messed something while putting I'm not sure what the word is. Let's just say dumbbells? A bar, kind of like putting it back to the rack, and my finger was between the thing and the rack, and it kind of like got swollen, and I was worried that, okay, this is the thing that I have constantly been tried to avoid, that I messed up one of my main PC mouse keyboard thing. Yeah, because without those, you're kind of screwed. But luckily, I recovered from that, and I didn't really broke anything. But it's the day in the life nowadays is pretty harsh. It's between 4 walls, working from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. And it's sometimes funny that, for example, I can honestly say that also my sleep schedules are a bit screwed, because when you have so much tasks and things that should need to be done, I cannot really control how my brain works at night. And usually there's multiple days in a week that I might woke up in the middle of the night and I have some really cool solution to some problem, and I open my phone, write it to the notepad, and go back to sleep. So there's these all kinds of weird things happening with the sleep stuff. And then when there are days where I have completely normal sleep and I don't have any, I get a long night's sleep and I woke up fully rested, it's kind of like weird, because you feel like, oh, this is like how normal people feel when you have when you have no issues and you have not woken in the middle of the night. So you have kind of get to this weird release developer war mode at the moment where you have...
Wait until you have kids, Antti, you'll know.
Yeah, but there's... I don't know even what to explain about this day in the life Antti topic, because there's so many... Maybe I talk a few of those side quest things that I maybe should elaborate that it's not
Yeah,
just about the
definitely, yeah.
game development.
Something, at least one.
I have so many things in mind, but let's take one of the latest ones. I have used Contractors. Most of the stuff is still solo developed. I would say way over 90% is done by me, but for some specific things I use Contractors. And those Contractors need documents, payment pipelines, tax stuff, accounting, all the kind of like company stuff. Well, I found out a while ago that when the contractors are from different countries have different tax agreements, meaning, for example, Finland and United States might have a different tax agreement thing going on than, for example, Sweden and Finland. So there's different tax deals done between different countries. And this means that, for example, if a contractor is from a country that has a specific tax deal made with Finland, they might be they might have perks that I didn't know about. For example, some tax, I don't know the word, reduction should not be done from this contractor, but it should be done from this. And when maybe something has been reducted on mistake, it means that you have to go back maybe multiple years, go over all the payments that have been made. You have to talk with the local Finnish tax official agency, get all kinds of approvings and retrospectively, I don't know, it's that's the word.
Yeah.
But going back,
Retrospectively.
Yeah, going back all this legal stuff with the accounting, with the tax agencies to get all that sorted out and be correct, which is quite important because you don't want to have any holes in your company legal stuff related to taxes. So there have been stuff like this that I have to be worried about, that everything is in order. That's one side quest that took some head scratching for sure. And stuff like this happens so often. This is just one small example, but I would say every other week there's something that pops up that needs my immediate attention. It's not maybe it's just company related, but it's something weird, unexpected. For example, I have another side story that I'm actually currently dealing with. When I created the Steam account, I operated under solo proprietorship, if that's the word. It means that I worked as an individual, because back then I was still in my full-time teaching job, but I needed to create the Steam account to gather those wishlists from really early on. And when I created the Steam account, I knew that someday I have to found a company and not, meaning be a limited company who's releasing the game, because that's the only company form that really can handle certain kinds of things. And I tried to scavenge the Steam backend and make sure that I can change the company form when the time is for the release. And I noticed that there was a button in the partner details called Change Company Form. And I think, okay, great, because when it's time to change, I can just press that. Okay, now is the time to change that company form. And a few weeks ago, I pressed that button and it opened a pop-up saying something like this: in order to change your company form, please contact team support to get an assistance. Okay, fair enough. I contacted team support. Maybe after dozens of emails and support tickets, the end result is that you cannot change your legal company form on Steam.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
And this means that I have a game. I will explain. This means that I have a game with 600,000 wishlists, but I can't release it in that account because the company, all the tax details and partner details are not set up for the release because I'm operating as a limited company. Okay, then it means that I have to. This is, by the way, how you should do things and how I managed to get the result that I'm currently dealing with. You have to create additional Steam account, totally new account, do all the new partner onboarding stuff, all the tax interview, and set that by default to be not an individual but an corporate entity kind of thing. It's a different thing, and for that I have to Steam outsources their tax interview for companies. You kind of fill these certain forms to prove that you are eligible for all the tax things, meaning you are not an USA citizen. Okay, I got that set up, but now there's this thing that my apps, all the wishlist and followers are on this old account. I have this new account, and now I have to transfer the apps, which is not that it's not that big of a deal, because you could imagine that when a publisher, for example, or there's some deals that some company gets purchased, of course those company apps have to be transferred to the new owners. So it's nothing really rare, but you could imagine that when your entire career is basically on the line and you have to make these transfer things and use certain tools that you have never used, you have kind of like, you are scared that if you make even one mistake, for example, if something happens that all the wishlists are gone or something there's some bug in the Steam app transfer tool, my entire career is dependent on this one app transfer thing. So even though I'm sure it will go fine,
for sure,
you would imagine that I have to spend quite a bit of time that I actually know what I'm doing with this app transfer, so that I don't mess this up this close to the launch. And once again, this is totally not development-related side quest that I have to deal with.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. These are just a few examples. Yeah, it makes sense. And it's like, for example, like what you just talked about in terms of the Steam page is something like I would never even realize it's happening, because I'm not a developer and stuff like that. And like an average gamer would not realize that these types of things actually matter. They exist. And it's just so important to be able to, not important, but it's so easy to make a mistake with such an important thing that is very vital to you. Wow. Well, first of all, best of luck with that. I really, hope that goes smoothly for you.
Yeah, it's probably not a big deal, but I'm just super paranoid and want to be. I'm sure Steam support have already. They're so tired of me asking all the basic questions, but I want to be so sure that I know exactly. For example, one reason, when you use that app transfer tool, you have to give the recipient email address who will approve the transfer. But in this case, because I'm also the sender and the recipient who will receive, and the same email is used for both these accounts, I'm definitely going to ask Steam, are you sure that this won't cause any issues, that there's the same kind of entity who is doing this from one to another? So there's all these things that this topic takes way too long compared how long it should be, but I just want to be so sure that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, of course, definitely. And as far as I understand, Steam is very responsive in that, right? They don't.
Yeah, I don't have anything bad about to say those. They have been really helpful with this and
fantastic. Oh, amazing. At least that, you don't need to wait weeks and weeks for them to answer. Steam is there to help, dude. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just a little kind of, let's say, foot in the water in terms of what it's like to be a solo developer, and I'm sure there's many, many more. I'm sure we could have a whole podcast episode talking about just the side quests. So
I could easily, even though I mentioned 2 examples, I could easily list 20 that have happened already this year, and some of those are so crazy. I think I'm not even allowed to say some of those because I might get some issues from those, But anyways, there's so many unexpected things, and those interfere with the development that when you're a solo developer, you have to react to those immediately, which means nobody's developing the game at the time.
Right. Definitely. Very interesting to know all these little, details, and thank you for sharing them. All right. So to concentrate on the early access again, which is, again, the most important topic of this conversation. So let's talk about the release timeline. When are you planning to release it?
This release timeline, it's not about when I want to or plan to release it, also when I can release it. So there's multiple factors to this. First is, of course, the choice that I want to have, which is so-called launch window, meaning which kind of part of the month, which day, which week I would choose, and I have to navigate through different obstacles as a small developer. For example, I don't know if many people know this, but I think a few weeks ago, or maybe it's still active, there's a Steam winter sale going on, which means that hundreds of games are in a discounted prices, and maybe many developers don't know this, but Steam, the storefront works differently in these sale events. For example, if I would release Road to Vostok in a Steam winter sale, the exposure might be totally different from the normal weeks. So I'm definitely not taking the risk, because there are multiple horror stories where people with similar wishlist numbers that I have released during these special events, and the exposure have died off quite randomly because the storefront was optimized for the winter sale and not for the normal game releases.
Right.
So you want to avoid these special events. So you want a stable, normal, boring marketplace as possible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then you have to avoid other game releases and big events that occur in the game industry. You don't want to release at the same time when there's a Game Awards. You don't want to release at the same time when there's new GTA game coming. So you have to pick the best possible month. And also you don't want to release a game when there's a Steam Next Fest event coming up. So my launch window, I have multiple of those. The first launch window is February, March, probably mostly March. There's one potential position where there's quite limited game releases. There's not much. Maybe there was some Horse Fest game in the Steam, but you cannot avoid all. There's so many fests nowadays that you cannot cannot avoid. But I'm fine of competing with Horse Fest exposure because it's not directly a competition to this game. In March there's one potential launch window, but also that means
this March.
Yeah, this March.
Okay,
that's the first of these launch windows. But I also must explain that means that I don't have development time until March, because all the assets and builds have to be delivered to Steam much earlier than that. You have to do playtest much earlier for the potential launch build. So there have to be at least 2 to 3 weeks buffer to that actual launch window. So when choosing your launch window, you have to understand that you don't have the time to develop as far when the launch window starts. It needs to close down the development much earlier. So I have to figure out what kind of early access content. Should I properly cut something? Should I limit something? Should I avoid doing something in order to make 100% sure that I will have time for this first launch window? But I'm not going to talk about those other launch windows yet, because I'm obviously going really focused on this first window on March, most likely. So that's where I'm currently trying to find space to squeeze in.
That's amazing. I mean, definitely a lot of work, right? Especially when you say that you have to give all the assets a few weeks before. Again, another detail that, for example, I didn't know, and adds a little bit of pressure for sure. I mean, I hope that everything works out as you plan to release it in March, because I want to play it as fast as possible. Can we talk about the pricing? Have you had, do you have an idea of how you're going to price it?
Yeah, the early access trailer that is actually one of the side quests that I'm currently doing, that's almost done. It comes at the end of this month, and that will reveal all the pricing and also talk about, if I have logged into this March launch window, it will say, the trailer will also mention about the March thing.
Right.
But in terms of pricing, there will be 2 editions. First one I will call it Standard Edition, and the another will be called Supporter Edition. So 2 editions, both will include the base game, the digital base game, all the future updates and builds, but the supporter version will also have the OST and custom, all the 4K concept art stuff, background wallpaper things.
Oh, cool.
But basically, even it's a bit marketing gimmick. But in true words, the supporter edition is for those who feel like the base game price is way too low, or they just want to support the development. It's an option that I want to provide as a developer.
Right.
In terms of actual pricing, still a bit moving topic, but I would say the standard edition is 15 euros and the supporter edition is 20 euros.
Wow. Okay. Those are interesting prices. I was just trying to guess the price while you were talking, and I thought it was going to be a bit more than that. Interesting.
I would say many people would expect that it's more, there's a high possibility that I would even get maybe some backlash of putting so low prices, because obviously it might not be that good thing if games are sold pretty cheap, because that it's not what the other developers want. Because if you understand the topic, but there's a lot of discussions about how much games should cost nowadays, and there's a risk, a certain amount of risk of going too low. But in my case, I based this price on a few different points, and the first point is that my end goal with this project is not just to build a video game. I want to build a brand, and video game is part of this brand. And the next milestones that happen after the early access, some of those milestones are dependent on how many players are playing the game. They are not dependent on how much money I made on the early access. They are dependent how many people got involved to this project. And what's the better choice for achieving those next goals? Meaning, should I price the game higher, sold few numbers but maybe make more money, or should I price the game lower, maybe get less more money but more players, or however that turns out. But it fits for my long-term visual goal that the game is as affordable as possible, so as many people can kind of like find the game and go to this Road to Vostok thing in the future. Another point is that I'm very self-aware that I'm not developing this game in a vacuum, which means that there's a lot of competition in this genre. I would say the survival FPS genre is one of the most toughest genres. There's so many stable titles, and especially if you have a single-player game, you got to have some leverage in terms of your release price. There's also free titles. You can right now download Stalker Anomaly for free, and that's an awesome game. Yeah. And you kind of still compete with each of those things. So there's no point of putting really high price if you have free alternatives on the market. So I think the 15 euros is sweet spot for me, in a sense that of course Steam takes the own cut, there's the taxes, but it will still leave me, because I maybe talked about this in the last interview, but this project is really unique in that sense that when you are founding a game company and you start this journey towards the release, there's so many middlemen usually along the way that your potential profits are cut multiple times before you ever get those. For example, you could have investors, you could have publishers. Most game companies have so-called recouping costs, that the development cost X amount of dollars, and you have to pay those costs kind of back from the profits that you earn from the release. But in Road to Vostok case, this is fully self-funded. I don't have any loans. I don't have any cost to recoup. I don't have any investors, publishers, which means that it's basically the same outcome if another game company with those middlemen and cost would release the game much higher price than me
I
making.
See what you're saying.
So I still earn the same amount, so I can use this leverage of putting the lower price to the marketplace, because I made sure that when I release the game, I'm in a position that this lower price can still profit me.
Right. That's a very interesting point of view and very, logical reasoning as to why you chose that pricing. And now it makes perfect sense. And I mean, again, as I said, I was expecting a higher price. It's lower. This is good news for the player base for sure. But again, it's still not 100% final, right? It might change closer to the release.
Yeah, but we are not talking any. If it changes few euros one way or another. So nothing dramatic. It's pretty much 15 euros and 20 euros.
Super, super, super. Very cool. All right. That's really interesting to know in terms of the prices and the timing. Very excited, hoping for the release window in March and, wishing you nothing but the best to achieve that. Super excited. But let's talk about what will happen after. So you will release the early access. We're going to get our hands on it, play it, review it and stuff like that. So talk about the development that goes after the launch.
The first thing that happens after the launch is that I'm taking a break, a pretty major one. And
yes,
there's finally. There might be a few, if there's some major bugs that really hurt the launch, of course I will fix those, but I will have to take some kind of break to kind of like reset this current work-life balance and health mode. And that's needed for the next milestones ahead. I won't 100%. Be gone in a year. I will be gone probably in a month, and then I will be back. But nevertheless, I will be taking a break shortly after the launch, and when I return, I will start working on the next build which is highlighted in that roadmap, and that's the AI build Nomads. And there will be around 8 to 10 builds coming in the next, I would say, multiple years, because reaching to the kind of like final form of Road to Vostok is going to take years. I have been quite transparent. It's stated on the website, and the Road to Vostok 1.0 is not ready next year. It will take multiple years, even with if I have all the development resources that I need, because I have so ambitious plans what this game will look like when it's ready. But I will start working on those builds when I come back from this break, and I would say there will be maybe 4 builds per year, and probably some small patches in between, but those builds are pretty major ones. They are like own separate releases. For example, the first new build, it changes so much about the core gameplay when the kind of like new AI and all the AI friendly AI factions, AI versus AI combat. So each of those builds is kind of like similar. There's a theme to those builds. They brought certain theme elements to the game, and they really elevate the gameplay in some sense. Almost those builds also bring new trader and new map, so they are pretty big content patches and uploads that will come. So that's the goal, what happens game-wise after its release, but also, like I mentioned, my long-term goal is not just to build a game, it's to build a brand, and there's going to be multiple things that are going to be related to brand building. And for example, the lore stuff I'm not happy about the current lore videos. They are not aligned with the stuff that I want to tell about the game, because you could imagine that if I would, for example, want to tell the lore about the military faction, it would need so much real-life gear, actors, lights, cameras, so the cost-benefit ratio for that kind of lore telling is not there. And I don't want to ruin, if I make some profits with early access launch, spending those profits to that kind of lore building is not the way I would say most players would want to be those profits spent. They want to spend those on development and make the game better. So I'm going to figure out, or actually I already have plans how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to focus on lore building. There's going to be some merch related things. Many people have asked when the Road to Vostok hoodies come into play. And I have all these cool partners already that maybe have some in-game items in the game are related to survival, weapon manufacturing. So there will be a bunch of collaboration things coming and all kinds of things that are related to brand building. And hopefully I also have funds and resources to hire some people help, because I'm going to, one of the key topics that would increase the work output and input is having some sort of, I call this a shield guy or girl, but when you're a solo developer, this information flood that comes to you, it creates so much noise and distraction that it's sometimes really hard to focus on the actual development. So if there would be some sort of person who would act like a shield from this noise and filter and curate this information that I don't have to deal with all the stuff, it would actually probably be even more beneficial to this work output input topic than just hiring another developer, because it would free my time so much on a weekly basis. So I would say I'm not sure if it would be called community manager. I'm not happy about that title or spending amount for that, but maybe you understand the point that I'm trying to make.
No, definitely. No, I definitely understand. And I think it's something that you very much deserve. And it would probably ease, take the weight off your shoulders, to be honest with you, because it's been 4 years, a little more than that. It's all on you, and I think it's going to be very well deserved. I'm so excited to hear about the news or the information about the brand, right? The brand of Road to Vostok, the potential collaborations, the merch store, and all of that. These are super, super cool, and gives me hope for many future conversations that we could have together regarding the whole, let's say, the project and the brand of Road to Vostok and everything that it will be in the future. Antti, I gotta say, every time I have a conversation with you, I get even more excited for Road to Vostok. I get even more, let's say, proud of the work that you're doing, and very happy with the relationship that we have. And I want to say a huge thank you for talking to me today, for letting us know all this information, all these intricate details. And, from myself, and I'm sure on behalf of all the supporters of the project, want to wish you the best of luck. And we're there for you and super excited for what's to come. So thank you for the conversation with me.
Thank you. And if I have time to a few closing words, I'm really grateful that even though I may be a bit complaining about having this noise and my work-life balance, I'm actually really, really grateful that people have been really nice to me. There have been so much support, positive comments. I think it's really easy to deal with my current situation, knowing that even if I fail something, the early access is rough around the edges. I think many people will understood that because it's a one-man product that is delivered. And I really like the transparency and the interaction that I have. Even though I haven't made any videos lately, I've been fully focused on development. There's so much positive comments and general vibe around this project that I'm really grateful about that. Thank you for all the people who wishlisted the game, leave the comment, join the Discord, help maybe the bugs, reported those, send me an email, even though high chance I haven't responded, but I have read all of those. So I'm in a very privileged position in many ways, and I'm highly grateful of that.
Thank you, Antti. Thank you very much again for the conversation. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.